What if I told you the Roman Empire did not fall because of one war, not because of one enemy, but because of its own decisions? It wasn't destroyed in a single battle. It wasn't ended by one barbarian invasion. Rome did not die overnight. Rome collapsed slowly from within. Today, we're not asking when Rome fell. We're asking the more important question: what really ended the Roman Empire? In the 2nd century AD, Rome was the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. It stretched from Britain to the Middle East, from North Africa to the Rhine. It had a massive army, a stable economy, and a sophisticated system of roads, aqueducts, and laws. Cities flourished, trade boomed, and order was maintained across a vast and diverse territory. Rome was not just an empire, it was a system, a civilization that defined the known world. But behind all the glory and strength, the first cracks were already forming, because the real question was never, is Rome powerful? It was, can something this vast last forever? After its golden age, Rome faced a major problem: unstable leadership. The transition of power became a deadly game. In just 50 years, during the crisis of the 3rd century, Rome had over 20 emperors. Many seized power through assassinations, coups, and sheer military force. The empire turned into a constant, bloody fight for the throne. Now, some of these emperors were capable, but many were corrupt, violent, or simply incompetent. Instead of governing the empire, their main focus was just staying alive and in power. The result? The administration grew weak. The empire was plagued by internal division, and the people lost trust in the state itself. When the leaders are only looking out for themselves, the foundation of a nation begins to crumble. And all of this chaos was expensive. The constant wars were expensive. Maintaining the massive army was expensive. Running the cities was expensive. To finance the empire, emperors started making desperate choices. They raised taxes to crippling levels and, more disastrously, they reduced the silver content of coins. In other words, they created massive inflation. Money became less and less valuable. This destroyed trade. Poverty spread like a disease. Small farmers, who were the backbone of Roman society, could no longer survive under the heavy tax burden and were forced to abandon their land. That land became concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy elites. The middle class, the very engine of stability, was wiped out. Without a strong economy, even the greatest army in the world cannot survive for long. At the same time, Rome had become a victim of its own success. It was simply too large to control with the technology of the time. Imagine trying to manage thousands of kilometers of borders, dozens of provinces, with constant threats on the northern, eastern, and southern frontiers. The army was still powerful, but it was extremely expensive and dangerously overstretched. It was forced to defend too many fronts at once. As the number of Roman citizens willing to join the army declined, emperors began hiring foreign mercenaries to fill the ranks. These soldiers fought for pay, not for the idea of Rome. Their loyalty was to their commander and their next paycheck. When an army no longer defends an idea, but only its own survival, the foundation of the state begins to crack. Now, we often hear about the barbarians, the Goths, the Vandals, the Huns, the Franks. The popular story is that the barbarians destroyed Rome, but the truth is far more complex. They didn't invade because Rome was strong. They crossed the borders because Rome was already weak. The frontiers were poorly defended. The army was divided by civil wars. Internal conflicts never seemed to end. The so-called barbarians were often fleeing other threats, like the Huns, or were simply looking for a safer, more prosperous place to live. When the Visigoths sacked the city of Rome in 410 AD, the world was shocked. But this wasn't the beginning of the end. It was a symptom, a loud and clear signal of the decay that had already been happening for centuries. Perhaps the most profound reason for the fall was something less tangible, the loss of a collective identity, a loss of will. Rome was once more than just territory. It was an idea built on duty, honor, and service to the state. But over time, that idea faded. Citizens no longer saw the empire as ours. The gap between the super-rich elite and the impoverished masses grew into an unbridgeable chasm. Corruption became normal. Bribes and self-interest replaced civic virtue. Even the formal division of the empire into East and West revealed the problem. Rome was no longer one body, but two separate worlds drifting apart. The Western Empire, with its capital in Italy, grew progressively weaker and more vulnerable. The Eastern Empire, later known as Byzantium, would survive and even thrive for another 1,000 years. The final moment came in 476 AD. The Germanic general Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, a young boy ironically named Romulus Augustulus. But there was no epic battle for the city. There was no heroic last stand. It was a quiet, almost anticlimactic transfer of power. The Western Roman Empire officially ceased to exist. It wasn't destroyed in a single, spectacular moment. It was worn down, piece by piece, over centuries of internal rot. So, what really ended the Roman Empire? It wasn't one single cause. It was a perfect storm of political instability, economic collapse, an overstretched military, and an empire too large to govern. It was external pressure from migrating peoples, but, most importantly, it was the loss of its inner strength and unity. Rome wasn't truly destroyed by barbarians. The barbarians simply walked into a house that was already falling apart. The real question this history leaves us with isn't just how did Rome fall? It's could the same thing happen to us? Because any society that collapses from within doesn't need an enemy to bring it down. If you enjoyed this journey into history, let me know in the comments. What do you think was the main reason for Rome's fall? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.